And these would be among the elite in that society. And this is all told about in verses 17 and 9 through 19 in chapter 6 of Luke, which is just before our text. It seems to me like in this crowd, or that this is the very same crowd from which Jesus had chosen the 12 and appointed as apostles, which we discussed last week. Reading that, it seems like we're talking about the same crowd, and what we're going to talk about today occurred right after he appointed those apostles. So now Jesus looks at his disciples, and that's key. He looks at them. He's speaking to his disciples, and he speaks. And he's delivering what is sometimes called the Sermon on the Plain. Have you ever heard of the Sermon on the Plain? Well, that name comes from the fact that Jesus came down and to a level place, a plain. And that's the way Luke describes it. In Matthew, we hear about the Sermon on the Mount. You're familiar with that, right? And in Matthew, we see what is sometimes that sermon beginning with what is called the Beatitudes, the blessings. And Luke's Sermon on the Plain, if you want to call it that, closely corresponds to the Sermon on the Mount. In fact, some scholars believe, really, and probably most of them do, believe that these are two different accounts of the same event. Luke tells it a little bit different from Matthew. And whether they are or not, it doesn't really matter. They both begin with blessings, which in Matthew are referred to as the Beatitudes. But Luke only has 4. I think Matthew has 9. But Luke also follows up those blessings with what he calls woes. Woes is misfortune or wretchedness that could have to deal with in life. So here's the thing. Jesus delivers, the sermon that Jesus delivers is shocking. It's not what is what is expected. So it's no doubt to this people listening, then they're hearing a series of bombshells that they weren't expecting to hear. And so we're going to read now what Luke had to say, or what Jesus said according to Luke in chapter 6, verses 20 through 26.